When we talk about where a country is headed, what we're really talking about are its policies. But have you ever stopped to think about who actually writes those rules? The ones that shape, well, everything? Today, we're going to dig into that very question. Who really makes public policy in Malaysia? The answer might surprise you.
And this quote, wow, it really just sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it? The idea that public policy in Malaysia isn't some well-thought-out, debated thing, but a top-down gamble, a high-stakes bet made by a handful of people. So let's look at how this gamble actually plays out. Nothing shows you how a system really works like a crisis. Let's take the 1997 Asian economic crisis. This was a huge moment. While everyone else was following international advice, Malaysia went its own way. A special council, not the public, made these massive calls, pegging the currency, bailing out big companies. It was a textbook top-down move, zero public input. And it was a perfect snapshot of a system designed for exactly that, centralized, decisive control.
And look, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This is how the system is often described. Business-friendly, sure, but not necessarily market-friendly. So what's the difference? Well, it means the government's got its hands firmly on the wheel, steering the economy with things like 5-year plans, quotas, and subsidies. These are all signs of a centrally controlled process, right? It's where the state, not the free market, is the one picking winners and losers.
And this leads us to something kind of strange. For a country where politics is talked about everywhere, in coffee shops, at the office, you name it, there's a huge gaping hole where the debate about actual policy should be. The conversation is all about the political drama, but the nitty-gritty details of the policies that affect our daily lives almost never come up. Just look at this. It shows the disconnect perfectly. On one side, you've got what grabs all the headlines, scandals, political personalities, and really divisive cultural debates. But on the other side, these super important policy issues, things like green biofuels or the ASEAN Economic Community, that get almost zero attention. There's this massive void between what we talk about and what's actually being decided behind the scenes. And here's a really crucial point. The political parties themselves, they often aren't the ones creating policy. Seriously, if you were to ask a loyal supporter to list their party's specific policies, they'd probably have a hard time. The focus is so much more on the big personalities and these kind of broad, vague values, not a solid, concrete plan for how to govern.
Okay, so if the politicians aren't really the ones driving policy, then who is, right? It's time to pull back the curtain a little. For decades, the real engine room of policymaking hasn't been in Parliament. It's been deep inside the civil service, what you might call the administrative state. And here's how that traditional power structure looks. Think of it like a pyramid. Right at the very top, you have the Prime Minister's Department, which is basically a super ministry. And tucked inside that is the really powerful Economic Planning Unit, the EPU. For a long, long time, these two were the main architects, drawing up the blueprints that all the other federal ministries and state governments had to follow.
And you really can't overstate the EPU's power. It's the central nervous system, right? It gathers all the info and creates the master plans that every other part of the government has to stick to. It's so influential that it basically calls the shots, making sure that real policymaking power stays right there, close to the Prime Minister.
But hold on, because that's not the whole picture. In the last several years, there's been a huge shift. A brand new and very powerful player has entered the game. And this, my friends, is where the story gets really interesting.
What happened was, the government started to, outsource the job of creating public policy. This really picked up steam under the Najib administration. Suddenly, consultants, many of them working for special units like Pemandu, were the ones in the driver's seat for massive national plans, like the Economic Transformation Program.
Now, bringing in outside help sounds good on paper, right? Fresh ideas. But there's a catch, and this is where you see the real risks of outsourcing policy. You get these reports that are more like unrealistic wish lists, with goals so far in the future that nobody can ever be held accountable. Sometimes the consultants don't even have the right expertise, and you get this feel-good culture where the goal is to make the client happy, not to actually solve the tough problems.
And this quote, it just hits the nail on the head. Public policy stopped being just a public service. It became a product, a commodity to be bought and sold. You've got this whole industry of consultants now, lobbying officials behind closed doors, all competing for these big money contracts. And what does that mean? It means our major national strategies are being created completely outside of Parliament, with basically zero public oversight, no transparency at all.
All right, so let's recap. We have a system where policy is being made in secret. either by career civil servants or by private consultants. So what's the actual cost of all this? Well, this is where that disconnect starts to create real, tangible problems for everyday people and for the economy.
So why does any of this matter to you? Because this whole thing, which sounds kind of abstract, has very real consequences. We're talking about things that affect everything from the type of car you can drive to the future of the nation's energy supply.
Okay, here's a perfect example. Let's say you want to go green, do your part, and buy an electric car. Makes sense, right? Well, in Malaysia, you could hit a brick wall. Why? Because the policy process is so disconnected from reality that the basic rules you need to even register an electric vehicle just don't exist. Progress is literally stuck in neutral.
Or how about this one? Malaysia has massive potential for developing green biofuels. But there's this old top-down policy still on the books, heavy subsidies for gasoline. This policy actively works against the development of green energy. The old way of doing things is so baked into the system that it's blocking any path forward for cleaner fuels.
And look, it's not just about tech or the environment. Economic innovation is getting stifled too. For instance, there's a huge opportunity for Islamic banking to grow, to diversify into things like community co-ops. But that can't happen. Why? You guessed it. The policies needed to make it possible haven't been created. So that potential for growth, totally blocked.
Okay, so it's pretty clear this closed-off system is creating some serious problems. Gaps, roadblocks, you name it. The big question then becomes, what's the solution? How on earth do you go about fixing a process that seems this broken?
Well, the core argument here is that good governance is about more than just picking the right leaders. It's about building the right system. The real path forward is to fix the process itself, to make it sound, transparent, and consultative. And that last word is key. It means getting input from everybody, not just a tiny, select group.
And that leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. We spend so much of our energy focused on the who, the different players in the political drama. But what if the real key to a country's future isn't about who is in charge, but about how they govern? Maybe, just maybe, the most important thing we can do is change the rules of the game itself.